You can get away with a lot in a 5K, a 10K. You can get away with some stuff even in a half, but you cannot get away with these things in a marathon. It'll just eat you alive. It'll eat you alive. You'll be walking and you'll be wishing that you'd done something different.
When they finally fill that tank to 2.5 litres with this work, then they have these humongous breakthroughs. Yeah, it's been a game changer, this one.
Earlier in the week, I sat down with FOD Runner and Sirpoc, two of the smartest and most influential voices in modern endurance training. And our goal was to explain exactly how to adapt the Norwegian Singles Approach for the marathon. But what followed was honestly the best conversation I have ever had about running. We go over the exact changes each of us made to NSA for the marathon, race fueling and why so many runners get it wrong, how to structure the long run, how to manage fatigue from week to week, race pacing, race tactics, future plans. There's even some quick fire questions at the end from some of you guys. Now there's no getting around it. This video is long, so bookmark it, come back to it, listen to it as a podcast, do whatever you need to do, because I promise you, you're not going to want to miss any of this. There's gold from start to finish. So grab a drink, sit back and enjoy this pub-style chat with FOD Runner and Sirpoc.
What I'd say is over time, the training has become less intense and the results have got better. I think that's the best way to describe it. So I'd approach a marathon back in the day like full steam ahead, and I'd often have a terrible result because my endurance was never there. Now I'm a lot calmer on the approach and the endurance is there. Who'd have thought, hey? So yeah, I just approach it a little bit less burnt out. I think that's the best way I put it. When it came to race day, I felt poppy, lively, like I stood on the start line, and I recorded it in my vlog. I basically said, I'm going to go for it today, but I feel like that was a bigger indicator out of anything in that block that this approach works.
I've only run the one marathon, but I certainly didn't feel like how people told me you should feel when you run a marathon, which is that you should feel absolutely fried, like going into the taper. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But
no,
you know,
you're spot on.
It's interesting to hear from your experience, because that's how a lot of people said to me, no, you shouldn't be feeling like this for a marathon. You should be feeling like, you know, you're almost baking 10, 12, 14 weeks out. And to me, that's just nuts. I can't understand it.
I just want to interject there, because that is a brilliant point. Again, I said in my final week vlog of training on the Wednesday or the Thursday, I said, I feel too fresh, I feel too good, I feel like I should have done just like a 7-day taper, and I've never felt like that ever.
The difference with this is I think there's a point where if you're doing enough hours, you can probably absorb that load, but we're probably somewhere in that grey area in the middle where we're not, you know, your daily life, your stress, all of that added up. You're not laying in bed all day recovering from these massive sessions. There's got to be a compromise somewhere, and I think the compromise is just making sure you spread that load out over a week, which is what the whole thing comes back to, is fatigue management and load management. There's not really anything magic going on anywhere here. There's not magic with the sub-threshold stuff. There's not magic with the easy pace. It's just spreading it out, spreading everything out over a manageable amount of time. But also on the flip side of that, of how people say traditionally you approach a marathon with that block in mind, and really all I did was a couple of years of how I've been training and just topped it up a little bit at the end, and that's it really.
Oh my god.
I'm a bit of a problem solver, and it was sitting down and thinking, well, actually I've got to get to work. Even though I'd posted for years about sort of the training I was doing, I didn't really know how it would look for a marathon, and I just thought, sort of looked at it on paper and I just thought, I don't really think it's that complicated, or it's not maybe as complicated as people making out. I don't feel like it needs to be this big deal where you're going out and smashing out 20, 21, 22k at just below marathon pace and stuff like that, because again, it's just going to disable your training for maybe 2-3 days after, where I've got to get up for work on the Monday. I've somehow got to fit in a run on that Monday as well, and it just, all that stuff just spirals quite quickly. So it's just thinking again, how can I approach it with not really changing much, because obviously I had a massive base behind me. I'd been doing it for 2 years, but then how could I just sort of flick a switch and just turn it on for, you know, maybe 3 or 4 months of something that wasn't sustainable, but something that, you know, might do me sub 230. And quite quickly I was thinking, unless I've really misjudged this, I could probably run 225, maybe slightly faster, unless I'd completely misjudged the whole thing. But I was prepared to sort of put myself out there and sort of try it, because I was reasonably confident, but it was probably the least confident I've ever been on a start line, to be fair. I was excited for it, but I wasn't really sure how it would play out until maybe about halfway through the marathon, to be honest.
Well, it was all new for you, right? You never run one. And, you know, you ran 224 in London, which is incredible. But, you know, conditions on the day, probably would have been 222 on a different day. It was working so well for you. Like, why did you feel a need to change it going into a marathon? Like, it seems fairly obvious, but I wanted to ask it anyway. Like, why the need to change something that was working so well?
There's just no getting away from it, mate. It's the distance, the sheer distance. It's just everything I was doing can get you up to a half marathon, 5k, 10k, half. You know, I could have probably run a good 1500, but you're just not going to get away. But you need some longer reps once a week, probably, almost certainly, and you absolutely need the time on feet. There's just no hiding away from that. That's the one thing that you can't get away from. You're getting up towards, you know, 3-hour target marathon. You're probably going to need to run 3 hours on your feet on a Sunday. 2.5 hour marathon, you're going to probably need to be running at least 2.5 hours on your feet on a Sunday. So it becomes a whole new thing, doesn't it?
But would you say those are the big changes you made, just lengthening that long run and making some of those reps a bit longer?
Yeah, definitely. So the reps definitely a bit longer. You're going to have to put yourself in more uncomfortable situations. The marathon is an uncomfortable situation not from the start, but it becomes it, obviously, during it. And obviously, back to just the time on foot. That's what I think is the key thing. I don't actually think the long run's that important. Like, that's probably quite a controversial way to think of it, but I genuinely don't think... I think it's important to do the time, but I don't think it's that important to do anything special with it. But I don't like the idea of people doing, you know, 30k runs 10 weeks out with 15k at marathon pace and just stuff like that. I see load as like a water in a tank, and even for a marathon, that you can only fill it so much before it overspills. But I think the temptation is to do too much too soon in marathon training.
Let's talk about the long run and how we adapted that. So James, you were just lengthening it initially, right? Just making it a bit longer, all at easy pace.
That's it. That's all I did.
But at the end, you did put in some like marathon pace stuff, right?
Yes. So the end. So basically, we're getting used to time on feet. We're just getting and we're adapting the body to literally be running, you know, because when I started out on the marathon build, I was running 90 minutes. So 90, 95, 100 minutes was sort of my longest thing. So I'm not going to be able to suddenly go into that and do anything really drastic in that. I've got to get used to being on time on foot, time on feet, just getting used to the body to just being out there for 2 hours. Because just being out there by 2 hours already makes it a hard run, or a harder run than an easy run. And then as you're getting towards the end of it, then you're just you're sprinkling in a little bit of specificity at the end. So that might be you know, the 5x5k, which was a very hard session, but I'm doing that quite late in the game. It's almost just to confirm where I'm at rather than anything specific, just to put myself in that uncomfortable position. Those sort of specific ones near the end had a particular purpose. They were there for a reason, and they only came in maybe, and that's where it's very unusual, because they maybe only came in like 4 or 5 weeks before the end, you know, after a half marathon that I'd done 3 or 4 weeks out even. Whereas everything else with the long run, everything else up to that point was very basic. It was all geared towards more time on feet. It might be 120 minutes one week, 125 minutes the next week. The next week might be 130 minutes. The whole build of it is very, very, very slow. It's not your usual like ramp rate where you're going up and then you might be going down and tapering off a bit and then you're building some more load. It's a very neat linear sort of build, and that's sort of how I was approaching the long run and the whole build towards the marathon.
Cool. So to kind of summarize, correct me if I'm wrong, but you kept the usual 3 sub-threshold weeks for most of it, and just started lengthening that long run all at easy intensity, and then 4 or 5 weeks out, you started putting some like sessions in that long run, and also doing the bigger sessions during the week. Is that right?
Yeah. So most of, like, you know, 3 times 5k might replace the usual 3 times 3k on a Tuesday, and then it would be a normal week with a long run. Then, you know, as we got towards the end, then the long runs might be 10k straight of marathon pace, and then the rest easy. Or, you know, I think there was one in there, wasn't there, where I did 8 plus 8 plus 8k straight, so that's 24k just under marathon pace, and then at goal pace. But that's all very late. It's all very late, and it's all very specific. We're talking like the last 4 weeks here. Everything else before it was very, very basic. There's not much more to it than that, and a lot of people want it to be jazzed up or this or that, but it just comes back to the basics. I think as humans we want to overcomplicate everything, and it doesn't need to necessarily be tinkered with or overcomplicated too much, I don't think.
Social media overcomplicates things.
And I think we also want to make ourselves feel better by working harder, because we think, right, I must be making more progress because I'm really hurting.
It doesn't work like that, though. It doesn't work like that.
No.
That is not how, you know, that is not how your body absorbs load. That it just doesn't work like that. It doesn't work. Everyone thinks of like running as isolated sessions, or this or that, or this session will do this, or it just doesn't work like that. I think I've said to Andy before, and it's one of the things I've put in the book that I've written a lot, like the actual makeup of sessions of training is largely not that important. It's the makeup, it's the impact of load over a cumulative amount of time. That's the important thing. But the really important thing is how you recover from that. The rest is just details, really. And I know that sounds so simple, but I think, like I say, as humans, we want to overcomplicate it and overthink it a bit more, I think. Or, you know, like Andy says, you go on social media and you see this magic session to make you a sub 16k runner or whatever, and, you know, people like to hear those sort of things, but that's not how it works. That's not how I got good at running. How I got good at running, or to where I was, depending on, you know, how you view it, is it took a long time, and there was nothing. It was doing the same thing week in, week out, making sure I stayed as healthy as I can.
So Andy, tell us about your long runs.
For me, I was that runner that used to approach things from a 16-week block, shrunk it down to a 12-week block, and then last year I went for an 8-week block, and it was the best thing I ever did. And last year when I did an 8-week block, I kind of had that moment of, you don't need to run a 12-week block. It cut literally what James said. It depends on what you do before that. If your cumulative load before you get to the specific phase is good enough to handle the specific phase, then you don't need 16 weeks. And realistically, when you do a 16-week marathon plan, the first 8 weeks is just fluff, and then the final 8 weeks is really where you get into the meat of it. And so this year I knew I wanted to revisit that 8-week point, and so my long run started, I guess, 8 weeks out, whereas, as I said, James's was 4. But for me, again, coming from the other end of the spectrum, I've shrunk it down to 8 weeks, and I've realised just how much more like fresh I felt with doing 8 weeks. And so my long runs started in, as I said, in that summer. I just rinsed and repeated a double T on a Tuesday, a long single T on a Thursday, which is 4x3k, and then 20 by 30 second hills on the weekend. And I just did that every single week. And then when I got to that final 8 weeks, I just went, I think my long runs they had some intervals in them, then there were some unbroken tempos. So I would do, like I said, 60 steady, 60 marathon effort, but then I would do some intervals in there, like I would do a long steady and then 6 by a mile. So I did put a bit more emphasis in the long run, but then James runs 7 days a week and I run 5, and that comes down to, I get 7 runs in in 5-day weeks, so I rest a Sunday and a Wednesday, and that purely comes down to childcare, like nothing else. On a Tuesday, I have 2 hours of an evening pretty much every week, term time, where I can do stuff, which is why I tend to double on a Tuesday, because I know pretty much guaranteed I can go and double. So my structure is slightly different and has to be slightly different just with the kids. And like I said earlier, it just comes down to me getting in 30 to 34k worth of threshold. So I knew in the long run, I was getting, when I was moved on to the singles approach, I knew that I was getting 10 on the Tuesday or 12. I was doing like 10 by K, then I would do 6 by 2k. So that was 22k worth of work already. So the long run was then a top up of that to get it up to the 32. And then probably, I think it was like week, oh God, was it like 6 weeks out or 7 weeks out? I think I did the first longer one, 4 by 5k, and then it just went from there. But honestly, like, as I said, coming from the other end of the spectrum, I felt so fresh, it was unbelievable. And that half marathon that I ran, which was pretty much a 2-minute PB, and I've never PB'd by that much in years, was born from doing that much threshold every single week. Doesn't matter the structure, whether it was double T or single T, I just stuck to it like glue for weeks, and bam, it was produced that. I felt good on the day, fresh on the day, and felt great. A bit battered afterwards, but again, same feeling when I hit the marathon. So although my long runs were a little bit chunkier, a fun fact for this block in particular, number one, I did not do my usual, I usually do 16 miles at marathon effort as my biggest long run. Didn't do that this time. That was actually scheduled for the week after my half marathon. I was too beat up to do it, and that was obviously a blessing in disguise because I didn't need it at all. And that made, like James said, people go out and do these massive, huge long runs at marathon effort or just below, like I usually do. Didn't do it this time, and that reaffirmed to me I don't need to do that in the next block. And again, the second thing was with those long runs, it was my, I think I only did 5 over 2 hours or 5 over 20 miles in the last 8 weeks. And again, I would, as a minimum in a block, do between 6 or 7, but this time I did 5. So I did one less than I normally do. I didn't do my long unbroken marathon effort, and I still came away with a PB. So again, like James is saying, it's so damn basic, but people want to make it complicated, and like it's taken me years to get to this point. I'm grateful for James's insights because he made me go down that rabbit hole to work that out myself, and then having chats with him, and just like, yeah, it's been a game changer, this one.
But that's another thing people don't realise about the marathon. Like, even 3, 4, 5 seconds difference per kilometre is enough to just explode you, like absolutely just blow you out the water. So I actually was on the start line and completely changed my mind to, I was thinking, like, when I went to bed the night before, I was thinking like 2:22. That's about where I'm at. But I don't think enough people changed up their plan that day. No. for their fitness. Like, if you thought you were going to run 2:30, you probably had to go out at 2:35. And if you thought you were going to run 2:25, you know, you might have had to go at 2:28, 2:29. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but that is enough, I promise you, to like explode as well, like all over the place. And like Andy said, there was just people, like, it was just
bodies littered.
It was just everywhere. There was just people walking everywhere, like that you were.
I do want to say very quickly, and I know it's not part of the NSA chat or whatever, but fueling, I've got to touch on it very quickly. Something that I've really focused on this year was just hammering the gut with fueling, because it's something I failed on. And again, when I spoke to James about this, James come from a cycling background, he can fill you in, but basically his words were he can't get his head around why runners underfuel so much. So like, I really feel it would be valuable for you to share, James, like how much fuel you took on board that day.
So I took on the big SIS gel, so they're the better fuel one. So
yeah,
basically every 5k, so I've basically taken at least 120 an hour grams of carbs. Even that, really, I dropped one as well, which was like devastating. But I just couldn't get my head around runners' running plans. People would take 60 or 80 grams an hour, and I was like, you insane? Runners just do not fuel enough, and I genuinely believe that. And I was just like, whatever I was going to do going into it, I was going to make it's expensive because I ended up buying lots and lots and lots of the expensive gels. But I was just absolutely like down in those on those runs just to get to the point where I could take 7 or 8 gels on race day and actually be fueled properly. Even when I dropped one, that was like one of the worst moments of my life. Honestly,
So-
like that was psychologically damaging in a way I can't explain in the moment.
I dropped one on the start of London Marathon on my second one, and someone ran past me and said, "Oh, Andy, have you just dropped a gel?" And I was like, "Shit, no, I have, but I didn't want to go back and get it." So I know exactly what you mean.
But yeah, in general, I just think if for anyone, I would always just practice over fueling. Like if you can get your stomach to handle it in training, it's going to be fine on race day. And there's just why even bother with trying to mess around with like 60 and try and get through a marathon 60 grams an hour. That's just nuts to me. I just don't understand it.
I think it's just GI issues in general. Like I think most people now know they need to fuel, but you know, there's a lot of jostling and cycling. You're much stiller. I think probably Andy, you can speak to this because I know in some of your videos you were saying one of your main goals is just to take on more fuel. So can you tell us about that journey and how? Because I know you've always wanted to take on more fuel, but you just can't, right?
Yeah, years ago, like basically I just get a stitch whenever I took on anything, and at that point I was just seeing an osteopath every single month because my back was bad and I couldn't work out what it was, and anything I put in my stomach, drink, fluid, whatever, gel, the second it hit the stomach, cramps. So I basically went to a PT, a personal trainer, started doing some stuff in the gym, got a plan together, and it's the classic age-old thing. I'm going to I'm going to an osteopath, right, to fix an issue that I can fix myself just by strengthening up. It's like, it's again such an obvious thing. So I stopped going to the osteopath because I started doing core work, started doing upper back work, and guess what? My stitches went, and it was all because I was hunched over and my diaphragm was compressed right in my stomach, so everything would just literally, I'd curl over like this and everything would spasm up. And the second I did some core work and I opened up my chest and I opened up my diaphragm, nothing, no problem whatsoever. So I was like, right, last year I will just hammer the fueling. And I went to London 22, that was in October, tried Morton, threw up all over the road after the fourth one, persisted with Morton, tried and tried, went all through the year, Abingdon last year, Morton, threw up after or nearly threw up after the fourth one. I actually spread it out a little bit more and I just faded really bad again because I literally took on 60 grams of carbs an hour, and I'm 6'6", I'm not 5'6", so I need more anyway. So again, the second I finished Abingdon, I was like, right, Morton are going in the bin, I'm not interested, I need a new fuel. So I tried a few out, went for Precision in the end, I totaled it up, I spent over 200 quid this summer in the space of 3 months so that I could hammer 3 gels on every session on a Tuesday, Thursday, and then in the final 8 weeks get 5 or 6 gels in on the long runs. And I just did it week in, week out, and I took 7 on race day, and again, absolute game changer. I went into this marathon without a time goal, but with the goal of fueling, and that was goal achieved.
I could handle about 3 at first before literally I had to run up the stairs as soon as I got home and, you know, straight on the toilet sort of thing. But you can
How long did that process take, James?
I think basically started it in about February. So I think I started with 2, went to 3. Like I say, had a couple of near misses, but it's much like training. It's much like training. You can get better at it. You can train your body.
Yeah.
Like Andy said, the only downside is the cost, really.
In training your gut, were you adding like a gel a week, or what was the?
Yeah,
how
sort
were
of
you
thing.
building that up?
I think I was going for about sort of half of started off like, so instead of 120 grams an hour, I think I was going for like 60, then I was going to build it up to 90 an hour, if that makes sense. So I'm sort of like on a 2-hour run, by the end I was taking about 6 when I don't really need about 2 hour 15 near the end. I was taking about 6, and I was just making the assumption that 7 or 8 would be all right on race day, that if I could handle 6, Do you know what I mean? It was getting to the point where that was fine, that I gambled on that 7 or 8 on race day would probably be fine. So I think I was doing probably about 80, 90 an hour sort of thing. For
When you're not training for a marathon, do you feel the midweek sub-threshold sessions?
No, it's only an hour. Don't really need to. Sometimes I'll have maybe like a banana, a bit of toast beforehand or something like that. On the longer ones in the marathon thing, maybe if I was doing like 3 times 5k, might like treat myself to one on like the third block or something like that, the third set of reps. But yeah, not in general. So and the longest, the special block or whatever you want to call it as well, that was good for practicing fueling properly. Maybe taking a fuel whilst you're at marathon pace or whatever, and making sure I wasn't doing it when I was stopped. Just little things like that. I know it all sounds silly things, but it just all these little bits add up. Working out how to open them when you're running, just all these little things. I know it all sounds silly, but that's kind of how I approach things. All the small details and all of that, really.
Leave nothing to chance.
Yeah, maybe I'm too obsessive. I think some people think I am probably too obsessive. But I think like all the small details matter. Like literally, if I can get a little edge somewhere with something, I'll do it.
I must admit, I found taking a gel on during easy and steady paces compared to taking a gel on marathon effort is completely different ball game. Like I could probably sink 10 gels during an easy run, no problem. But when you're at marathon effort, you're working harder, your blood's being diverted elsewhere in the body to keep everything going, and your digestion slows because of it. That's when you get the stomach issues. When people go out too hard, they struggle to take on fuel because the digestion slows, because the blood moves elsewhere in the body. So when you see people that have gone out hot, they'll be the ones usually throwing up in the second half, or they say, oh, do you know what, I just couldn't take on a gel. That's another thing that not enough people talk about. Go out at the right intensity, your fueling will go down a treat, you'll be able to take it on so much easier.
Well, most people run a crap marathon because they pace it wrong. It's as simple as that. That's the minute. Well, I'm not. Again, it sounds simple, but honestly, most people who I see run a really bad marathon is because they've just pitched the pacing wrong. And again, that's another thing. People are like, I'll get quite obsessed about pacing. But if you know your fitness and you pace it and you fuel, you've taken off basically the main things that can go wrong in a marathon. It's being honest about yourself of where you're at. And that's, again, that's probably a major thing of where people go wrong in a marathon. But training like this will give you a good idea of where you're at week to week, month to month, over the course of X amount of time. And if you know that, it makes everything so much easier. If you know how to pace, if you know how to fuel, it takes the two, they're probably the two things that combine, that when everyone talks about the wall in a marathon, that's probably the two things. They're coming together at the same place. Your fueling hits, your pacing's gone wrong, it's around 30k, all hits at once, the shit hits the fan and it explodes. And if you can take those two things away, the marathon suddenly becomes a lot easier as well. Yes, obviously you've got to do the training to get there. You have to have the aerobic capacity to be able to run for 2.5, 3.5 hours, but you're limiting. It's all about limiting the things that can go wrong, and that's where, again, I know people think I'm obsessive about this stuff, but that is where you can take these things off the table. And I think rather than speaking about magic sessions and stuff like that, we should be talking about all of these smaller things, maybe necessarily, that go into the bigger picture of, we're specifically talking about a marathon really today, aren't we? But that is also where it's the most key. You can get away with a lot in a 5k, a 10k. You can get away with some stuff even in a half, but you cannot get away with these things in a marathon. It'll just eat you alive. It'll eat you alive. You'll be walking and you'll be wishing that you'd done something different.
I think you have to get obsessive with the marathon because, for lots of reasons. Like, it's such a big day. You spend so long preparing for it. Like, why would you risk sabotaging that just because you haven't, like, in my builds, I even set up a trestle table with drink cups on it so I can practice even simple things like drinking. I time my long runs to be exactly the same time as race day. Like, I get super obsessive about that stuff because I want to control everything I can so that come race day, it all just feels normal.
For me, I get baffled by talking about being obsessive, where people go, oh yeah, I didn't have a good race today, whatever the distance, don't care what it is, I didn't have a good race today, I don't think I fueled very well yesterday, I don't think I did this very well this morning. And I'm like, damn it, man, you've paid your entry fee. For me, like, I know this sounds really stupid and obsessive, but I know what my breakfast, lunch and dinner and my snacks are going to be the day before to make sure I'm well fueled. I know what my breakfast is going to be the next day. Like James said, take the things off the table that could be an issue. When they're out of the way, there's literally, unless you get injured during the race, there's nothing stopping you from going from A to B how you want to and executing the race that you want to. The second that you get sloppy with your preparation, prior preparation prevents piss poor performance, that's one of the classic sayings. The second you get sloppy with it is the second that you can kiss goodbye to your, like, it's either gonna happen or not. You're gonna be much more confident if you know you've done X, Y and Z the day before and the morning of.
If you could touch briefly on like what works really well in this block and what you do differently for next time.
Pretty much nothing. I'll pretty much do the same and hope that I'm going to do a little bit more, so maybe a bit more. So I'm going to do a little bit of cross training, I think. I'm going to try and maybe do a couple of rides a week as well and see where that goes. I don't know if it'll be enough to get where I want to go, but I also know what you've got and what you've put up on the screen, you know, if it's already gone up, that's about the limit of what I can do running.
Yeah.
Don't think I can do much more than that without risking not making the start. That's about the limit, I think. That got to the point where my whole training philosophy that it's sustainable forever, like you could do it, you know, to infinity, but that wasn't. If that makes sense, that got to the point where, okay, this is quite hard. So I'll probably do that and probably do a little bit of cross training as well and just see if that...
Is that in addition to what's there or instead of?
In addition. So it'd be something like virtually the same build, which I've already almost started, potentially for another marathon, with maybe 2 or 3 hours cycling thrown in as well.
And what about you, Andy? Will you be continuing the kind of single threshold approach in the weeks leading up to it, or what will you change for next one?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got no intention of changing. So I've gone back at the moment. What I did in the summer, I'm now trying to do again from now until Christmas. So I'll be doubling on the Tuesday, long Thursday, hill Saturday, exactly the same, what I would call base phase. So I plan on doing another, what is it going to be, like 7-8 weeks of double, and then when I hit January, I'll go back to singles. Basically, I'm going to alternate double T, single T in blocks.
I've been lucky enough to speak with Marius Bakken recently, quite a bit actually. If you can handle double threshold, that is the gold standard of training as far as I'm concerned. If you can handle it, that's the way to go. But whether we could handle it, you know, like I'm training where I'm, like I say, that linear load where I'm pushing it up and recovering all the time, I'm not sure, but I might be able to find a halfway. My plan is maybe a bit of a halfway house with the cross training in the morning and then the session on the Tuesday and Thursday, and then keeping the Saturday the same. Whether that'll work, I do not know. We'll find out in maybe 4, 5, 6 months, and then we can.
The problem again, we've talked about this, James, haven't we? The problem with double T is the intensity. So again, like I overcooked it the very first time I did it, and then last year when I did it, I felt like I got it right, and I got it right this year as well. And I don't think people respect that the morning session has to be so relaxed. So my marathon pace ended up being 6:04 per mile, but in training it was more like, I don't know, 5:55. My LT1, my morning session, lactate threshold 1, was like 6:10 per mile, so I was about 15 seconds off per mile from my marathon effort, slower. And I've seen a lot of social media influences, and this is the problem with social media. They'll do like, oh hey, I'm doing like marathon effort in the morning, but it ends up being a smidge quicker, and then like 10k effort in the evening.
Yeah, too hard.
And they're like, oh, we're so toasted, man. Oh yeah, that was tough, but yeah, we've done it. And I'm like, are you trying to injure yourself? It's just a recipe for disaster. And that's where double T goes wrong for so many people. If you don't respect that the morning, I mean, we say singles is monotonous, but doing LT1 work is more monotonous, and people don't expect it and don't like it and don't want to do it, or they don't accept it and they just try and push things.
So James, what's next for you? Because you seem to be pretty much fully recovered from injury. And I think on Strava, have I seen you started to do a little bit of double threshold? Like, what are you working towards?
I don't know really. I think I'm probably gonna try and run a marathon early next year. I think, but it's quite selfish, really. I'm only gonna run it if I've got a chance of running the time I want to do. Because this is the thing. Andy's really passionate about running, and I really love that, because every time I talk to guys like Andy, it like rubs off on me, and I think, right, I really love running for like the next half hour, and then I really don't like it again, or I don't love it as much. But I feel like if I've got a goal I can work towards, that's where I get my kicks or the buzz out of running. But I don't think I'll turn up on a marathon start line unless I'm confident I can. Not really any like big goals, just personal goals for me, really. Like, that's what running's about for me. It's not about, competition and winning races and stuff like that. It's just these arbitrary targets I've set myself. So I think I've got a plan to get there, and I might do, there's the Seville marathon's an option, trying to get Andy to come to that more for the, after drinks party afterwards.
Just thinking about your Strava, I noticed recently you had a 24x400 session pop up. So first, because you originally started off by doing that, and then you seemed to drop it.
Right, one of the reasons was I looked you up and I saw that you loved this session, but I knew it was going to come up. And I'm really negative on it. I'm really negative on this session, and I know I'm negative on this session. So I thought I'm going to do it because I'm really negative all the time about it. I slag it off all the time. I haven't raced a 5K in ages, so I thought I'd do it. And my thoughts haven't changed. I do not like that session.
So why did you start doing it initially then? Because you did start off doing it, right, as part of the rotation?
Yeah, initially, only because that was one of the things that I'd seen. A classic was maybe 25. A very easy way of doing it was a lot of people were saying 25 times 400 meters around 10k pace or critical velocity or whatever. It was very easy to sort of narrow that down anyway. But it felt quite hard quite quickly, and I've got this new metric I'm trying to push, which is called LFS. It's how your legs feel. It's called leg something score. You can fill in the F for yourself, but it's how your legs feel the next day after a session, and that is always where my legs felt. I'd always put it in the notes on Strava or like the hidden comments just to go back to reference myself. And there was always a pattern where when my legs felt the worst was always the day after that session. But I tested lactate levels, and that session, the 3 minutes, the 6 minutes, and the 10 minutes all generated roughly the same. Within a couple of we'd be arguing semantics, but effectively it created the same amount of lactate. So I just thought I'll just get rid of it. I personally didn't see a purpose for it, and then I noticed that I wasn't particularly struggling for 5Ks either, even though I wasn't getting anything even near 10k pace. So I hadn't done it for 2 years, and then we'd spoken, and I saw on your Strava, and I was like, this guy likes his 400s. So I thought I'd throw it in and see if I'd change my mind. I don't hate it, and I've been speaking to Marius quite a lot, and he really loves 45 seconds with 15 rest. So Whoa. I've promised him I'm going to give that a go as well. So it's going to, it's all about experimenting, because I shouldn't be I know I am closed-minded to the shorter stuff, but I'm also really paranoid about how much it really beats my legs up. But then again, Andy will tell you the opposite. Andy finds that the longer ones harder. So this might be where it just comes down to personal preference, and you're just tailoring it just to suit your needs. and maybe I'm making excuses but getting away with it because I'm not great at them either. And maybe I do need to do them more because it's a weakness. And there's actually an argument for being, instead, I've got areas that are really strong. Maybe I should be working on my weakness.
I honestly love that one. And I strongly feel, and I might be so wrong and far off the mark, but James is obviously from a cycling background. I mean, you're an aerobic monster. There's no getting away with it. You know, you don't run a 224 for no reason. You aerobically, you are so fine tuned. Whereas me, coming from my sporting background, which was always short, fast sprints, I feel like fast twitch is my game. Yeah. Like, you know, and so 400s, I did 400s the other night, and it was just like, oh, I love this. I mean, it gets boring after the 15th, 16th. But I just don't feel beat up by it. Whereas if I do 3x3k or 4x3k, I'm like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? It's a completely different feeling.
Because I'm in that stage where, you know, I'm happy to experiment a bit for the sake of experimenting. I think I said the other week, I feel like I've almost completed the training program that I put out. There's not really anywhere I can go with it. Like what I ran and what I've done is pretty much maxed out. But you've got to also remember it took me 2 and a bit years to get there. You want to do it, do it. If you recover from it, great. Like I say, the actual makeup of the sessions themselves aren't the important thing that's going on here. It's the accumulating load over time and recovering from that load. That's all really that matters. If you're doing that, do what you want, really. You know, I've written a book that basically says that.
You were saying maybe by December you'll be taking pre-orders for this book, is that right?
Well, not pre-order. It just goes straight up on Amazon, really, because I had a few publishers.
Oh, cool.
I had a few publishers who wanted it, but too many people want to change too many things, and I'm not interested in that. I don't really care. You know, I had people tell me they could sell me 50,000 books, and you know, all sorts of stuff like that. But you start to lose the message. People were like, well, we'll put this in, we'll put that in. And I'm like, oh, I don't really care. I'll just, even if I sell 100 copies, but I get what my message is across, that's all I really care about, to be honest. If it helps one person rather than sending 50,000 people down the wrong road, so be it. So I hope people enjoy it. I think it's good. A lot of people have had a little read. I know Andy's had a little bit of a read as well. I think Brilliant. It's in good spirit, and I think people would think, you know what, that's pretty good. I actually thought I'd hate it, and I don't hate it, so that's a good sign, isn't it?
That's a very good sign. That's awesome. So we'll definitely let you know, guys, when that's out. But can't wait for that one. We've been talking a while. Do you have time for some quick fire questions from some of my viewers, or do you need to go? Absolutely.
That's all right. The darts can wait.
Well, James, I know you're a huge fan of strength training. Any other training stimulus outside of running, like gym, cross training, plyometrics? Let's start with James.
Cross training is great. So I feel like, especially if you've got like an injury that like might need clearing up, cross training is brilliant. In some ways, you can just do more. When I was injured for a few weeks, I actually kept cross training longer than I needed to because I was just enjoying it so much. I've seen lots of people run 5 days and cross train too, and virtually be just as good as they were.
Yep. And no gym or pliers for you though, right?
I don't know what a gym is.
You do bicep curls.
What about yourself, Andy?
I do core twice a week. I must admit, sometimes it falls to once, but I try and do it twice, and that's only because of the issues I've had in the past. Like, I just don't want to go back to having a weak core. Other than that, I just do little things like when I do calf raises when I'm cleaning my teeth. When I'm getting ready for my run, I'll do bird dogs, 10 squats, and then as I lock the front door, I'll do 5 walking lunges down the drive, 5 walking lunges back up the drive. This is just before every single run. I just do it. So I wouldn't say I have a specific, and I'll sometimes, I'm a bit slack on it at the moment, but I have been doing some weights for my upper back just to hold me upright a bit more, because I'm a bit like the leaning Tower of Pisa when I get running, especially as I get towards the end of a race. So that really helps. But ultimately for me, as long as my core is decent, like I've got, being 6'6", I've got long levers, as I've been told many times. When I go and do things like, my PTs have said, don't do planks, don't do anything that's going to hold you, because you just sag too much. You've not got the strength there, so you need to do a bit more compact core work. So I'll often do things like dead bugs lying on the floor, and various other things that I don't know the name of. But as long as I'm not like sagging in the middle, which I know sounds crazy, but I do, because I'm so bloody long. So I definitely do specific stuff, but I don't do plyos or anything like that, which I know I should do, but I don't. I do enough.
I would say, by the way, don't do what I'm saying if like a physio or someone's told you've got to do this because you've got a specific injury. It's just, I'm a lazy person and I just can't be bothered.
That's a good point Andy mentioned. So that classic habit stacking. So I was laughing when you said, I lock the door, then I do 5 lunges. So that's classic habit stacking, is it? Like, that's how you fit stuff in, guys. If you're struggling to fit it in, every time Andy locks the door, he does 5 lunges. So you don't have to think about it; it just happens. Cool.
I'm glad I don't live near him and walk down the drive.
You'd be like, what is that guy doing?
Okay, recovery between intervals, slow walk or jog. Let's start with Andy.
You want.
Slow jog.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters personally.
Doesn't matter. Jog. If you want to walk. If you want to stand.
The only time that it's ever different, and you wouldn't do it in any NSA training or any single threshold, is when you're doing Canova stuff and he asks you to do floats. Otherwise, everything else is a very slow jog or a walk or a standstill. But I must admit, I can't stop moving, so I got to do a slow jog. So
you answered a lot of these already. This is a good one. How much less training effect do you get when you fall to the low end of sub T?
That's a good question. That's a really good question, because I've spoken to a few people about this, and I want to find someone stupid enough to do this. Which is someone to basically try and run maybe sort of around first lactate turning point, LT1, whatever you want to call it, every day. And I want to see what happens. And I suspect the mechanical load is too much on the body. I'm not 100% sure, but I'd like to see someone maybe even try it 6 days a week, but pitched at the right, because you might have to adjust the paces, obviously based on the day, based on that, but to pitch it around that lower level every day. Just a small thing. It's come up on the Let's Run thread a few times and Strava. Nobody's stupid enough to do it, I don't think, but if there is anyone out, contact me and then we'll see, because I suspect you can do more volume if you bring it in, but where that balance point is, or that tipping point between not enough intensity but enough of not enough intensity that you're replacing it with volume, is there. Whether it will break someone or not, I don't know.
See,
that doesn't really answer your question, sorry.
No, I was going to say, there's a chap around by where I live that James knows called Dan Nash. He's a very good runner.
Oh yeah,
and
Dan.
he's got a podcast. He's very well known. He paced Philly Bowden in the Berlin Marathon, so a lot of people will know him from that. And long and short of it is, I've listened to a few of his stuff, and if he's trying to do an LT2 session and his threshold's 172, he'll often say that he will always, without doubt, try and undercook it so that he then peaks to his threshold. He'll never try and get to like 168, 169, 170 too early. He'll try and aim to get to that in the second half of the session, and he's never worried too much that if he's even in the late 150s, early 160s for the first few reps. So I think that kind of answers that question. The caliber of him as an athlete. So I've always taken that into account. Like, I will never now go out and go, right, I've got to hit threshold straight away. I'll always kind of like work into it.
I think even if you're going quite a bit under, say you're getting 90% of the effect of a threshold workout, even if you're getting that 3 times a week, it's a pretty good week, to be fair.
Oh God,
it's still better than a lot of, even if it was like you did just marathon pace 3 times a week, it's still probably going to improve most people. But I think somewhere around, to answer your original question, probably somewhere around even marathon pace is even that split into 10 minute, 3 times 10 minutes, 4 times 10 minutes. probably a bit slower than what I do, but I think even that's a great place to start if you're unsure of where to pitch your workouts.
We need to remember, like, it's phase transitions. It's not like you get to a certain pace and all of a sudden, okay, bang, we're starting, we're in sub-threshold now. It's like they're phase transitions. I think there's probably more leeway at the lower end than a lot of people realise. So James, one question that you're probably well equipped to answer is about cross-training. So a lot of people are wondering, so can you drop some of the sessions? Can you drop some of the easy ones for cross-training? How many days a week do you need to be running before you should consider this? All of that stuff. So could you briefly summarise?
I think the balance point, if running, obviously running needs to be your primary driver. If running's your goal, running needs to be the primary driver of your week. I think 65% of your week, at least running needs to be your goal. If you really, really want running to be your focus and you don't want to be one of these duathlon or tri guys. So you might do, I've seen quite a lot of people success with 5 and 2, splitting 5 and 2. 4 and 3 might be the top end, but 2 of the sessions are sub-threshold runs, maybe 1 on the bike, 1 long ride. I think if you think about, absolute basic level, let's call it a 10-hour week. If you were doing a 10-hour week, 6 running, 4 on the bike, 4 on the elliptical or something like that. I think that's probably about the balance. I've seen people go the other way and go 60-40 the other way, and the running just drops off a bit slightly. There has to be a tipping point, and I'm quite confident in that, actually, around that sort of 60-40 point. If you can fit in just running, brilliant. But there are some people out there who need to cross-train because the volume that you need to be a good runner, they just can't sustain.
And before we go, any final things you'd like to put out there, like that could help the viewers, like general advice or common problems you see?
Loads. I mean,
I was going to say, where do you start?
Buy the book.
You could do a whole video on this, I think.
Yeah.
I think the main thing for me, if you're interested in the way I'm trained, some people are, some people aren't. I think you've got to put your head in the game long term. You cannot be thinking, where am I going to be in 4 weeks? Where am I going to be in 6 weeks? That's the thing you've got to shift. I've had people say to me, I've been doing this 6 weeks and nothing's happened. All right, well, come back to me in 6 months, and if nothing's happened, then we'll talk about it. All right, that might be a bit extreme on the other end. But I think it's shifting your focus from, like Andy was saying earlier, 6-week blocks, 8-week blocks, 12-week blocks. They mean nothing, really. That's the one thing I think if the mistake people make is they're thinking short term. We don't train much. We do this as a hobby. It takes a while to get good at this. It takes a while to stack those bricks. For the most part, say, let's take, I heard Andy mention Jack Daniels earlier, right? Let's take 6 weeks of Jack Daniels versus 6 weeks of maybe how you've been training, Jimmy. You've been following this. You could do 6 weeks of Jack Daniels. You've probably done more cumulative load. But the difference is, after those 6 weeks, you're going to need some sort of down week. You might need 2 down weeks further down the line. You might need, a complete deloading for a couple of weeks down the line. Over a 6-month period, the way you've been training now outruns the way Jack Daniels' book or approach might do it over an isolated period of time. So that's why you've got to think longer down the line. It takes long to outrun more traditional training programs, but you can outrun them in cumulative load because you don't need any down weeks. You don't need any of these weeks where, recovery becomes a problem. And I think that's what people aren't quite understanding. That's where there's no magic happening here. It's just keeping that linear curve and progression going up and up and up and up. I hope that makes sense to people, because if they don't get that, then I'm not sure it's worth buying into, because you may as well just smash yourself for 6 weeks and see what happens.
If I could say anything to anyone, it would be running is such an aerobic event, and being undercooked is so much more important than being overcooked. So when you follow certain plans, so I coach athletes, and one of the things that I always get is, I've been using the Runner app, I've been using this app, I've been following this plan, I've been doing that. And something that a lot of these apps and things are notorious for is, like, an app won't sell if it's providing you with 80% easy running. It's just not sexy enough, right? So they've got to have a selling point. And so you put in your goal 5k pace of 5k, and it's going to train you for 8 weeks, it will get you doing over unders and intervals at that 5k pace like 8 weeks out. And I've had a lot of people say, oh yeah, well, we've either got injured doing it or we got there but I felt really burnt out. And I'm like, so then I start training them and they're like, this feels a bit easy. And I'm like, just wait, I promise you, this is normal. What you were doing was not normal. This is now normal. And then they'll have their good results. And the second thing that I'll always say is, stop looking at things over a block. Look at things over a 365-day period. I've said it in so many of my videos. Like, I compare myself to this time last year, not this time 2 months ago or 4 months ago. A year's a good time to be able to look and go, okay, I've made some good progress here. But, you know, you're going to have factors within weeks, whether it's weather, whether it's illness, whatever it might be, you're going to have ups and downs. And so you might feel a bit crap when you come to do a time trial here compared to 8 weeks ago. But what were you doing a year ago? That is such a huge thing. So, like, I'll always say to people, keep it aerobic, undercook if necessary, and stop judging progress based on one block, because you might train hard, you might have a run that doesn't go well, and you're like, well, that block was a waste. And I'm like, no, that block was not a waste. You just had one bad run. You had 100 great runs in your training block. That one run that didn't go well just happened to be on race day. That doesn't erase the 100 runs that you've already done. That's the training that's stacking you up to be a better runner in the future. So it's, I guess, like James said, like, running is patience. It really is. There's no magic anything. You've just got to keep stacking it up.
And the irony is, in being patient, the progress me and a lot of people are seeing is just with this approach. It's just way faster anyway. So it's hilarious.
And I will say that I feel is because people have been overcooking their training and they're not doing enough aerobic stuff. So they're building a house
100%.
and they're putting the speed work on stilts. The stilts, the bottom layer of the house, is your aerobic engine. This is the foundation, and your speed work is the top. And so people, block after block, are doing not enough down here and too much up here. So when they finally fill in, they've got a 3 litre tank and they're only filling it to like 1.5 litres. When they finally fill that tank to 2.5 litres with this work, then they have these humongous breakthroughs. And then what will happen is they'll go, oh, this is fantastic, because I've read so many stories on Let's Run and the Strava group and stuff. And then what will happen is, the more they do it, then they'll hit that kind of plateau or stagnate a bit, because then they've kind of filled in their tank a bit more. But then by continuing the work, that's when they'll grow their tank a bit bigger, and then they'll make that next breakthrough. So at the start they make big gains because they're filling in the gap that they never trained in the first place. Then when they filled it in, they've just got to be patient, stay consistent, and then they'll have that next breakthrough. James may or may not agree with that, but
I pretty much agree with you there, Andy, because for me, the gains were easy quite early because there was a lot of room for growth. So there's a lot of that low-hanging fruit, or whatever sort of analogy you want to use for that. It was probably as easy as me to get from 19 5k to 16, and then the 16 to the 15 was probably harder than the 19 to the 16, because there was so much free growth there that I just hadn't tapped into. I was just absolutely just battered. I just was so beat up from how I was training, but I'd been training of how I'd got to that point, and it was like a full sense of security, because when I started, I was, a 28 minute 5k runner. Any training would have got me better. So I bought the first running book that I could find. It didn't really matter what that book was. I would have gotten better to a certain point anyway. But then I reached that plateau, that crossroads of just being cooked all the time, just being absolutely just beat up. But once I got past that, it was quite easy on this training to go from a 19k runner to a 16k runner. But like Andy said, then that last jump becomes quite difficult, because you have to do, the more no longer becomes more, because whilst you can increase load, you can't increase load at the same pace because there's not as much headroom to grow. I hope that sort of makes sense to people. And you get the floodgates open initially, but then there also becomes a time training like this where you've really got to become patient again, because actually to go from 4 hours a week to 6 hours a week when you're maintaining your recovery is not that difficult. But then if you're only going from 6 hours to 7 hours a week, the growth doesn't quite become as easy to gain. Then you get to 8 hours a week, and then really that's the maximum I would say you can run on training like I do. And then at some point, like I say, you've got to open up your ideas to something different, and maybe, you've baked the cake, now you've got to ice it. Like the cake is now cooked and made. Now when I try and put the icing on, the jazzing it up and making it look good. And that's where I think people want to go too early though with the exciting stuff. Like I say, it took me 2 years before you can get to the point where you need to worry about icing the cake. Bit of a crap analogy that. So James, I think everybody knows what I mean.
When you talk about icing the cake, are you talking about kind of once you've stagnated and built that huge aerobic base, are you talking about doing a short 4 to 6 VO2 max block, or are you
that might be
something else?
When I think the next thing, so where I've got to, I think the next step is double threshold. I don't think I can handle that running. I think I would probably break. I've got quite an active job, so I just don't think I can handle it. So I'm going to try and force that cross training into it maybe a little bit. But there might be that you roll the dice. The other way I could do it is try some intensity to maybe get to become a sub 15 runner. But there has to be a point where those aerobic gains, Andy talks about the tank. The tank's now probably 99% full for me. There's not many places for me to go. But it took me 2 years to get to that point. Like, I'm only worrying about that 2 years down the line. For someone like you, Jimmy, it might be, a year, 18 months down the line where you think, okay, well, actually, I've done this for X amount of time. There's not really many places for me to go, but it's way further down the line than people are thinking it is.
So good. Well, guys, you've been so generous with your time. Even though we've been speaking for so long, I need to go over there and we'll visit the pub one time. But thank you so much. You guys are legends. So everyone, when James's book comes out, make sure you buy it. Subscribe to Andy's channel. James, do you have any socials? Probably not, that you want to plug?
No, don't do any of that. Don't worry about that. Maybe buy the book so I can buy a couple of beers or something like that.
I'm sure you'll sell many copies. I can't wait. But yeah, guys, really thank you. I've learned so much, and hopefully we can do it again sometime. Thank you.
That's all right. It's great talking to you guys. It makes me hate running a little bit less. I'll be enthusiastic every time I do one of these. I'm like, really? Yeah, your running's great, and then I'll go to bed and sort of be annoyed after run tomorrow. But anyway,
it's been a pleasure, both. Thanks for having me on.